I made a film for another Filipino producer called Manila Open City. And John Ashley was one of the 2 or 3 people he brought over for that. And I got to know him while we were making the film. We got along quite well and decided to stay in touch. And that led to the association in films.
John Ashley was a kind of a teen heartthrob throughout the mid to late 50s. Did a lot of drive-in movies for AIP and others. He did the beach films, AIP's beach movies in the 60s as well. He was kind of a second-tier teen heartthrob actor in those films, and married to Deborah Wally, who was also in those films, and they divorced. And his way of getting over the divorce in the late 60s was to take a job in the Philippines doing Brides of Blood.
He just wanted a job. I mean, really, he was working as an actor for hire. He had worked for AIP heavily, but those days were over, so he took the job along with Beverly Hills or Beverly Powers and Ken Taylor, and they went over to the Philippines to do that film.
He just showed up one day and teamed up with Eddie, and they started making movies. Of course, John had, I think he had a drive-in chain or something that he had in the States, so he had that natural distribution thing all set up. So he was just looking for a place where he could make movies on a budget, and if he was trying to escape, then the Philippines was a good place to do it.
He became enamored of the Philippines, the people. It was exotic for him.
John just loved the Philippines. He loved the people. He loved the excitement.
He was a very big personality down there. He was well known in the Philippines, and which is an attractive and seductive way to make films too.
Eddie described him, he said he was a good old boy, which I guess by that he meant that he liked to go out and drink and chase the women and all the rest of it, and I believe he did,
John was a lover, he had quite a few escapades here. That's why he enjoyed the Philippines.
John Ashley had so much fun. That guy was an octopus. He had enormous energy.
I had a shirt made for him, and all his girlfriends were embroidered in that shirt. He loved that shirt. A lot of embroidery.
Just an incredibly nice guy, smart, and used his celebrity and his affability to advance himself in the Philippines, but at the same time, he was giving a lot of people a lot of work.
He wanted to play a bigger role in just not being an actor, but being involved with the production. So he eventually became involved with financing groups and being involved with making of the pictures. And when Hemisphere and Eddie split up and new pictures were going to be made, John Ashley was still connected with them, so he remained there quite a number of years.
John did a lot of films here, in co-producing it with Eddie Romero. It started in the 60s up to late 70s. The last one was one with Bob Conrad. The title was Sudden Death.
And he obviously got on with Eddie Romero. Eddie still talks very fondly of him. They formed a production company together and actually started to produce movies themselves, which were mostly horror movies.
The Twilight People, which was yet another version of The Island of Dr. Moreau, probably the most threadbare. And a movie about Atlantis with fish monsters, and also John Wayne's son as the star. So he had quite a career there, and really sort of found his niche there.
John was quite a guy. He was a good actor. He was starring in the films. He was producing some of the films. And he generally got along extremely well with the crew and the people. He had one gal that used to come with jars of food she made for him every day.
He was a charming person. It was very easy to get along with. He had great sensitivity for the personalities of other people. He was very easy to get along with. He was a good friend.
He's a guy who's still fondly remembered out there, and I think when you see John Ashley in one of these movies, it's a kind of a, you feel you're at home, when the movie starts, and it's got John Ashley in it, great, it's going to be a good one. It's that kind of stamp of approval, I guess, really, because John Ashley is an actor, I don't know, however good or bad he was. He had a sort of presence on screen, and he seemed to know exactly how seriously to take these movies and how to play it and what level to pitch it at. A bit like, in a different context, someone like Peter Cushing. You never feel that he's sneering at you or laughing at you, no matter how silly the movie gets. But you also know that he knows it's pretty silly.
Eddie was an extremely gregarious, nice, pleasant, intelligent man to spend time with, extremely generous. In between Black Mama, White Mama, and Beyond Atlantis, I was there for 5 weeks, not working because the producers couldn't decide who was going to star in the next film, and they didn't want me to come home and then have to pay to bring me back and all that business. And he would take me out to dinner, and one night he said, how about we go out to dinner tonight? And I said, on one condition, that I pay this time. He goes, well, okay. I said, so, it's your town, where do you want to go? Well, he said, how about the Manila Press Club? I went, okay, good. So we went, had an amazing dinner, and I called for the check, and he goes, there's no check, I'm a member, I get a bill at the end of the month. So I never did get to buy him dinner. Great guy.
I've always believed that Eddie Romero was quite intellectual in his approach to B material. Eddie never looked at making a B picture. I would look at making a B picture for a B audience with B elements, but not Eddie Romero. Every picture to him was an A picture that had complexity of story, character, and if you sat down and talked to Eddie, he'd give you a pretty good reason why that is. I'd say he's more of an intellectual than I am. I'd make a very simple, straight-line story that involved a monster and a this and a that, and people trying to avoid it. And Eddie would go into a whole history of the family and where they came from and what happened and all that. And I think, yes, sometimes it tended to be overly complex.
Eddie Romero is an amazing guy, extremely intelligent, extremely creative, and thinks things out very methodically, and then allows you to add the spontaneity to it. And yeah, he always went for a higher purpose.
He was very kind, very thoughtful, as a matter of fact. He tried to make something out of this movie. It was an action movie, come on. It was really a cartoon. And he really tried to make it have some kind of be noteworthy.
He wanted a complete story.
He wants his film to be, above from the original script, He always tries to inject something that's more sensible.
He's not just in it for the quick buck to do an exploitation picture, because he wants to do something intelligent where the characters make some sense.
He tried to make something out of the B movies. And B movies, if you just want to say B movies, you just walk through it. No, Eddie didn't want you to just walk through it. That's why you saw the characters all being serious, because everyone was taking it seriously.
It's interesting to speculate on the intellectual content of Eddie Romero's movies, but the man himself never really wants to discuss that. In his later movies, yes, there's structure and character arc and all the kinds of things that you expect from a art house movie. But in those early movies, really, it was a question of let's get a simple characterization as we can. Let's create a situation that's very tense, and then let it play out, and make sure that people don't have too much dialogue to say, because these probably weren't great actors, and they might get it wrong.
His films have remained classics. People still want to see them. They're still popular. This is something that he puts in those films that makes them interesting, maybe subliminally, He's giving these people in the audience something they weren't planning on getting. Yes, maybe it's a little too intellectual in some cases, but I think that he was probably right, not wrong.
The high concept was let's get as much as we possibly can for as little money as we can spend. I mean, I think that's the concept of all those movies. I know that some of them, for example, Beast of the Yellow Night, which is a film written and directed by Eddie Romero, starring John Ashley, that kind of has a high concept in terms of its. There's a sort of philosophical debate between the devil and this guy that he's raised from the dead, who he turns into a werewolf and so on. But I remember talking to Eddie Romero about that, and I said, well, it's got an interesting theme. And he said, has it? What was the theme of that film?
It was the first film that, for the American market, that I initiated myself. It didn't come from the States. I wrote it myself. And I insisted on being able to do it, and finally they let me do it, and that's how it came into existence.
Well, I would say Beast of the Yellow Night was the most cerebral Eddie Romero picture because he borrowed the Faust story and other things, because that's the way Eddie is. He's a great intellectual.
I felt that for that type of film, the characters were more fully developed, more believable. Less formula.
He said, Sam, I'd like you to read the script. And he gave me the script, and I took it home and I read it. And it was a very complex Faustian story about this man who sells his soul to the devil. It had elements of cannibalism in it. It was wild. But I felt it was too far out. And I said it to him. I said, I think this is too far out for this kind of a market. Well, funny thing happened later on. That film ended up being made, but not for Hemisphere. It ended up going to Roger Corman, and Roger Corman was kind of stuck with it. He didn't really like it. And so he and his partner at the time, Larry Woolner, came to me because they knew I was buying horror films from all over the world, and I licensed the film to them called Creature with the Blue Hand, which they felt they needed to give some kind of raison d'etre to the double bill of that plus Beast of the Yellow Night. And I still haven't heard much about Beast of the Yellow Night being a popular film.
I mean, I have no idea how long the Eddie Romero movies, for example, took to shoot, but I imagine probably 10 days or something like that, maybe a couple of weeks at most, you know. So it was almost like automatic writing with those movies. I remember with Beast of the Yellow Night, when the film was released on video in the UK, the reels were put the wrong way round, you know, so he sort of died, you know, someone dies and they come back to life. But it sort of doesn't make any difference. And when I told Eddie this, you know, he just laughed. He said, did anyone notice? And I said, no, it probably made the film better.